The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Well, coming up on today's Verdict, many of us rent our apartment, which means our lease gives us certain rights. And one of those rights is the warranty of habitability. But what does that mean? Well, among other things, it means you have the right to have a bed-bug-free apartment. On tonight's show, we discuss the problems tenants face when their home is taken over by bedbugs as well as other types of vermin. Have I piqued your interest? I bet I have. So stay tuned. We look at bedbugs, mice, and worse on this week's Today's Verdict. Hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney for the next 30 minutes, David Lesch. My first guest is a familiar one, at least to me. You might even recognize the resemblance. And if you have been bit by a bedbug, you will want to hear what he has to say. Well, we at Today's Verdict welcome attorney, friend, and brother to yours truly, Gary Lesch. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. All right. When we were younger, I really don't remember hearing too much about bedbugs, maybe in some stories that children would usually read. But why all of a sudden now it's bedbug mania?
Well, I think you should first realize just how bad the problem is. You know, just last year, I think there were about 12,000 complaints all across New York City. Compared with that from 10 years ago, it was only 500. So there's been a mass explosion from, in the period of 10 years, it's just got out of control.
But what was going on, prior to, let's say, 2004? Did they not exist? Did they just not come overseas? Why did we not really hear too much about them? I don't understand.
I don't think it reached the critical threshold for it to explode and just start spreading from apartment into apartment and from home to home. You had about maybe 500 complaints back in 2004, and they were managed. You had exterminators coming in, and even if they didn't do a great job, it just wasn't spreading at a quick rate. But once you hit a critical threshold, and the combination between the exterminators not really knowing how to treat it, because they've never had to do it before, as well as sometimes not so great landlords not wanting to treat it correctly. There are plenty of great landlords in New York City. Some aren't so good. Those two factors combined didn't control the problem, and then it just proliferated to the point where in 2011 it was just an explosion and got on everybody's radar.
An explosion where? I mean, are they just in houses? Are they throughout the buildings? Where are we finding most of the bed bugs right now?
You're going to find them in the buildings because they spread. Somebody comes home and they introduce, let's say, bed bugs to an individual home where it's pretty much confined in that home unless somebody takes them or somebody takes an old piece of furniture, spraying to another house. So it's more or less confined. They don't jump, really from household how they don't cross the street to another house. But once you're in an apartment building, if the landlord or the exterminator or a combination of both don't do the right thing, they spread, and they can spread quickly. So it's very important that they do the right thing and that they exterminate correctly.
But by the way, there's a reason you're here. How are you even related to this type of topic, by the way?
As your viewers probably know, we do personal injury work.
Right.
And literally, a bedbug bite is a personal injury. If a landlord doesn't do what he or she is supposed to do, and they breach a duty that's owed to you, and you get hurt, well, you have a case and you have a personal injury. With respect to bedbugs, people don't realize that besides the fact that while you have them, they're uncomfortable, they're itchy. A lot of people have sleeping problems once they know they're in their apartment. They really can't sleep, but they leave marks. They leave scars. They keloid. And these are marks that people will carry for the rest of their lives. And scarring is, of course, a personal injury.
So that gives somebody a right to bring an action, let's say, against a landlord or somebody if they end up getting the scarring as a result.
Oh, absolutely. And as you well know, and I'm sure your viewers know after watching you for all these years, somebody has to owe you a duty that they have to breach. Well, in this, you have a warranty of habitability. Your landlord is supposed to be providing you a, for lack of a better word, bug-free environment. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, and I keep saying they don't do what they're supposed to do, if you have a bedbug problem, you alert them, well, they're on notice now that they have a problem, and they have to take the proper steps to eradicate them so you don't get hurt.
Now, some of you viewers don't really understand but the term notice.
Okay.
What do you mean when you say that there has to be notice of a problem?
You got to tell them, before, or tell him or tell her, before they can fix a problem, they have to know about it. So your first step is, if you suspect there's bed bugs, you have to tell your superintendent, your landlord, maybe the management company, saying, look, I think I have a bed bug infestation. Right at that moment, they have to do something to make sure that they eradicate that problem so you don't get hurt. They have to bring in an exterminator right away. Sometimes they have to treat multiple times, and I think you're going to be hearing from the guest that follows me how they're supposed to be doing it. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, well, then you have a lawsuit.
All right, so let's say you get somebody comes into the office and they think they have a potential case. So
Okay.
what's the first thing that you do when you meet with this person? What are you looking for? Say somebody's watching right now, they think they may have a bed bug case. What do you say to them?
The first thing I ask them, even before they have a lawsuit, because you want to make sure they're okay, you ask them if they've had medical treatment. Is somebody taking care of you? Do they know that it's bed bugs, and they're giving you the proper creams to help you not itch them, to help it not scar? That's the first thing. You always want to make sure that your clients are not going to get any further injured or hurt more. Then you ask them what happened. When did they complain to the landlord? Because not every case is a case where you can sue a landlord. If you, let's say, report to a landlord and they immediately got somebody and the bed bugs went away, well, you may not have a case. However, if you do tell the landlord and they don't do what they're supposed to do, well, then you have notice, and usually it takes a month for them to get somebody in, and that's way too long. 2 weeks is too long. You want someone in there right away to make sure that they can eradicate the
By
problem.
the way, you mentioned earlier that the bed bugs will hop from unit to unit. Let's say, hypothetically, the landlord knows that the apartments on the bottom floor have all these bed bugs, and this client who walks into your office lives on the 4th floor. Now, the client didn't tell the landlord that there was a bed bug problem, but the landlord knew about what was going on the 1st floor. Does that make a difference in terms of that whole notice issue, or no?
Yes.
How so?
Because at this point, the landlord has reason to know there's an infestation in the building. And if they don't properly treat that original apartment the way they're supposed to, and then it spreads throughout the building, well, that's on the landlord. So even, let's say you move in and you didn't know, and you get bit and you get injured and you didn't tell the landlord yourself, the landlord will still be responsible, because that original infestation that they could have taken care of 6 months ago, a year ago, had they been doing it correctly, it would never have gotten to your apartment.
All right. You start the lawsuit, right?
Okay.
You're ready to go.
Okay.
You start the lawsuit. You put in some allegations.
Okay?
They answer you. The landlord answers you. What's next? What kind of discovery are you looking for to see if you can prove your case?
I want to see the extermination records.
Why?
Well, I want to see what they did in the first thing I want to do is see what other apartments in the building had them. Because if there was an apartment that had it, let's say 6 months before, well, you kind of know where they're coming from. And then you want to see what the landlord did with that first apartment. Did they spray that apartment the amount of times they were supposed to do or do the proper treatment? Did they look to the left and to the right of those apartments, the adjacent apartments above and below? Again, I think your next guest will speak more to that. And did they treat the cluster to make sure they eradicated the problem? What else do I want to look at in the extermination records? What they did in that apartment. Did they give it the proper treatment? Should they have used a heat treatment? Should they use a cold treatment? Should they have used sprays? Often or not, they don't pick the right remedy for that individual apartment.
Now, a lot of times you hear about violations.
Sure.
Violations for different issues in a building. People are constantly calling 311, or they're reporting things throughout the building that they feel the landlord should be fixing.
Right.
Do people actually report bed bug issues?
Well, absolutely. We started the show telling you that there are 12,000 complaints. From those 12,000 complaints, HPD will send out inspectors to your home.
Hold on a second. What's HPD?
Housing Preservation and Development.
Okay.
For New York City. They oversee.
And you can make a complaint to them if you have a problem.
It's they call 311.
Oh, okay.
They think I have bed bugs. The 311 routes them to the right place, which is going to be HPD. HPD comes, they do an inspection of the apartment, they know what to look for, and then they will tell the landlord, you have a violation here, you have to cure this violation. What's great is that the violations for all the buildings are maintained on a database that you can check for your individual building. So you can go on and you can see what other apartments have had these type of violations. You get a sense of what's going on in that building with respect to bed bugs.
Let's get back to the injury a little bit. You
Sure.
mentioned earlier that you have a couple of, I think you called it really scarring or dotting. What exactly happens to you when you get bit by a bed bug? Because most people think it's like a mosquito bite, but that's not true.
Well, generally it will occur in clusters, let's say along the arms, along the backs, and you get bit a lot. What will happen is that the darker your skin tone, the more likelihood that it's going to leave a permanent mark. The lighter skinned you are, a lot of times they often go away much like mosquito bites. But the darker your skin tone will probably dictate whether or not these marks are going to be permanent. We've had clients that have had their entire backs covered in marks and that have scarred, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And what do they look like, really?
They look like dots, they look like mosquito bites, sometimes bigger, but that are not going to go away, and sometimes they're all over your body. The worst instances is when it happens to kids, especially those with darker skin tones, because they itch and they're itchy. And when they scratch them, they tend to keloid, and those will really leave permanent marks. And it's hard to get a child not to scratch.
Do you find that juries are sympathetic with these types of cases, maybe as opposed to, let's say, automobile accident cases or other things? Do juries seem to feel for people who are bit by bed bugs?
That is a great question. It's a great point, and they really do. And the reason why is, one, everyone, when they go to sleep, want to feel safe. If you have bed bugs in your apartment, every time you close your eyes, psychologically, it's impossible to sleep because you think that they're literally eating you alive. Now, literally, they're not eating you alive, but that's what your mind is doing to you. The second thing is that no one wants them in their house. They can absolutely identify with that. And I can't tell you how many times that we bring this up, and you're just talking to somebody, and they kind of squirm, and they kind of start itching. So you get the sense that they really do relate well with the
Great stuff. I expect you to come back. I don't expect another 10 years to get you here. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will continue our bed bug discussion with an etymologist from Insult Associates. Stay right here.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
Welcome back to today's Verdict. I'm David Lesch. Remember to stay in touch with us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can always see past episodes on bronxnet.org. Well, our next guest is Louis Sorkin. He's a specialist in all types of bugs, especially bed bugs. Louis, just welcome to the show. What else can I say?
How are you?
All right, let's talk some bugs.
Okay.
All right? I mean, listen, bugs are your thing.
Yeah.
Not really my thing. Okay? Tell
good.
me about a little bit of your experience with bugs before we even go on a little bit here.
Oh, all bugs. I mean, I've worked with insects, and I even brought some big caterpillars along to show you.
You brought some stuff. We don't have to get them now. You
won't
can
get
leave
'em.
them. I
All
don't
right.
need to see some of the
And,
bugs right now.
I work sometimes with kids, you know,
Okay.
and introduce them to insects. I work with in forensics. I work in police departments and in homicide investigations and estimation of time of death.
So it's safe to
the
say
insects.
that you know your bugs.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about bed bugs, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
All right, tell me a little bit about a bed bug. Give me some names. What are they called? What are these
Well,
things?
the common bed bug is Simix lectularius, and that's
Okay.
the one we have a big problem with. It's a small insect, about 4 to 5 millimeters, less than a quarter inch when it's an adult.
Can you show with your fingers at all?
Yeah, about like this.
Really, really little.
Small, and then a millimeter when it hatches from the egg, and it's pale white colored at that point. So that's like a 32nd of an inch.
Okay, like,
in
I'm
length.
thinking of a ladybug.
Yeah,
Size of a
that's
ladybug?
much bigger.
It's much bigger.
That's big.
Half the
bed
size of a
bugs are-
ladybug.
Yeah, about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are really small.
They're small.
All right.
But when they fill up with blood, the pale-colored nymphs, because the immatures are called nymphs, you see the blood through them. So from a pale-colored white to straw color, you have this bright red object.
And that's the blood inside.
That's the blood inside.
Wow.
As it digests, though, it turns brownish to blackish, and then they leave droppings around. So that's one of the telltale signs to find bed bugs, is see the droppings, see their shed skins, because when they grow, they have shed skins.
All right, let's
It's a lot to it.
Let's start from an apartment that seems to have some bed bugs around.
Okay.
How does this even start? Where do they come from?
Part of it is when people travel and
Okay.
they go to hotels, they go to friends' houses.
When they go to like bedbug.com and they bring in some bed bugs?
Could be.
All right.
Could be. Or they, collect them themselves. They like them when they. Anyway.
People collect bed bugs?
I do.
Okay, well,
But I'm
that's
different.
you. All right, so bed bugs are now deciding themselves into an apartment.
They bring them into the apartment, and the bugs will usually be around where that person stays the most.
Why?
Sleeping, because they've evolved to feed on their host when the host isn't that active. But suffice it to say, in an office situation, if the bugs have been brought in from the home, the bugs are really behave differently and they're active during the day because their host is there during the day. Usually you'll find them on chairs, sometimes file cabinets and desks. But at home, you could find them on a sofa or a chair or tables and also a bed.
Let's say there's no host for months.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been away for a while. I take a year off. I'm not around.
If your
Do they go someplace else, or are they going to keep waiting for me to come home?
Sometimes they crawl around and they may pick up on neighbors. That's why multifamily unit apartments are a problem, because the bugs may move from one place to another.
Well, that's what the last guest said, that they jump from unit to unit.
Well, they don't. Actually, they crawl.
They crawl.
And they don't fly. They have wings, but they're not able to fly.
Okay, let's
They
talk
have
about
short wings.
talk about some of the biting here.
Yeah.
What are we really talking? Are they little nips? Are we talking about? Are we talking about mosquito bites? What are we talking
similar
about?
to mosquito, because they actually have modified mouth parts, a right and left side made into a stylet. So the stylet is actually pushed through the skin, and I feed thousands of bed bugs because I raise a lot of them. And sometimes I feel them feeding, and I watch them feed, and sometimes I don't feel anything at all. So it's interesting.
Now, one birth of a bed bug gives how many babies? How does this work?
Females, in order to produce eggs, have to feed on blood.
All right.
Males have to feed on blood to make sperm. And the mating has to occur. Now, the females can produce a few eggs a day, and maybe in her whole lifetime, which could be up to a year as an adult bed bug, it could be 200, or maybe even, in one case, there was only 500. But it's not like they're producing thousands of eggs, but they are producing a few hundred eggs in their whole lifetime.
All right.
And they're sticky. So wherever that female places them, they get stuck and stay there. That's a big problem, because it's not out in the open. It's in hidden places in harborages where they usually stay.
All right, let's talk about cleaning this up. No offense, but people usually want to get rid of their bed bugs. So you may collect them and play with them and do other stuff with them, but most people want them gone.
Right.
So why don't you tell us what I could do if I had a whole bed bug infestation in my apartment?
Vacuuming works well to pick up the large number, and then you'd have to put that bag, or if you have a canister type, you'd have to empty it into a container, a Ziploc bag, and throw it out in the garbage.
Now,
that's one way to get rid of a large number.
From what I see, it looks like you need a dog. Roscoe's got to sniff them out, and then you pick them up, and then you freeze the whole place. Like a Batman episode. I don't really understand.
Sort of. The dog is used, especially in low-level infestations, because even if I went in, sometimes into a whole apartment with many rooms, and start searching visually, you could miss them. The dog is trained by odor, so it's picking up odor of the bugs. And even the best dogs will pick up one bed bug or one live egg.
All right, let's give some tips here.
Okay.
All right, somebody's watching, they think they got a bed bug problem.
Right.
What's the first thing you're telling them to do? Like, flee? Pardon the pun. What do you do?
No, actually, you can either contact the pest control company or the one from your landlord from the building. And I've seen in many cases, people have contacted their own company, got the company to come in, treated, either a heat treatment, localized heat, or a whole different room heat treatment, or freezing with cryonite, which is a carbon dioxide snow.
How does that work? Explain that to me. How does
the
that even
cryonite
work?
snow, that has to be used, and it kills them because of the change of over 100 degrees difference from that frozen carbon dioxide snow to room temperature. The change in temperature actually kills them, but they have to be hit by that snow in order to kill them.
So I'm going to ask you a little bit of a tough question. I don't know if you can help me out here. I understand there are bed bugs and there are these bugs called scabies.
Well, that's mite.
Mite.
Different.
But they're different.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people think that if they're bitten by scabies, bitten by a bug that's been told to be a scabie bug, that it's the same thing as a bed bug. But that's not true.
Not true at all. No. The scabies mites are mites that live under a few layers of your skin. And the reaction you get is from the droppings or feces that are left in the tunnels.
So the
in
reactions
skin.
are from what's left over,
Right.
where the bed bugs are the
bedbug
actual
reaction
bites.
is the bite and the saliva that's introduced.
Now, have you seen more scabies than bed bugs, more bed bugs than scabies?
No, sometimes a lot of things are misidentified going by the bite or lesions alone, because there are little minute parasitic wasps that I found in the city that are parasites or parasitoids of stored product insects, and those people have had in their apartment because of the stuff in their pantry or in dried plants, and those wasps have stung, and they're only 2 or 3 millimeters long, and they're misidentified as a bedbug bite. So then treatment starts when there really didn't have to be treatment at all.
Well, Louis, I have to tell you, great stuff. I don't think I'll be able to sleep in a week, but I hope next time you'll be able to come back and give us some more information.
All
okay?
right, sure.
All right, well, we'll be right back after this break with Tenant's Corner on today's Verdict. Stay with us.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities, to ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete, or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give. Advocate. Volunteer.
Live united. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
This was me. And Mom and Dad. And my big brother Alex. And this was the day we all got to forget that I was sick. This was my wish.
Maybe he's really focused.
Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today.
Being a dad can be tough.
No. What do you mean she's not coming?
When's the fairy princess coming?
Any minute now.
But when you're willing to do anything...
It is I, Cruz Zinkelpel. Yeah. Okay, time for cake.
It's always worth it.
I know it's really you, Drew. I'm just pretending for the other kids.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Well, welcome back. When we rent our first apartment, it is an exciting time, but many of us do not really know what our rights are with or without a lease. Well, here to give us some much needed advice in the area of landlord-tenant law is Jeffrey McAdams. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So exciting. All right, so you get your first apartment, and guess what? You got to sign a lease, and you have no idea what's even in that thing, right?
That's right.
But there is this one, I don't know, warranty of habitability. Okay, what are you supposed to be getting as a tenant?
In every residential lease in New York State, they read a warranty of habitability. So whether it's written in or not, you have that protection. In New York City especially, you have additional resources because housing court was created to ensure the housing stock in New York City. So tenants were, from the very beginning, had a right to sue landlords to get repairs.
When we're talking about this habitability, I mean, it just really makes sense, habitable. We're talking about, heat, hot water. What else? What do we have that inalienable right to have as a tenant?
Well, you were talking about vermin
All
with
right.
the previous guests. You have a right to protection from that. Peeling plaster and paint, dripping water, leaks, mold, mildew, asbestos, lead paint.
And most of the things are written into your lease, am I correct?
Whether it's written in or not, you have a right to it.
You have the right anyway.
It's implied in every lease in New York State.
So that's very important for somebody to know. So
It
even
certainly
if it's not in your lease and there's a mold or something like that, you would have the right to be able to recover from your landlord. Am I correct?
That's correct. And recovery is in two different ways. One is you have a right to get repairs, and two, you also have a right to a rent abatement. Now, the right to a rent abatement is weakened today because of the blacklisting issue.
Why is that?
Because there is an enormous cost to ever being sued in housing court. 20 years ago, it used to be that if you needed repairs, you could stop paying your rent. The landlord would then sue you. You would ask for an inspection. HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, would send an inspector to check off the things that you asked them to see. And then a report would come back to the judge saying, these are problems in the apartment. The judge would have to order the landlord to repair any problems the judge was notified
How
of.
have things changed now?
Well, nowadays, when you withhold your rent, the same process occurs, but as a result, you're on a tenant's blacklist, which, when you change apartments, will make it more difficult. These blacklists are supposed to be purged every 7 years.
And let me guess, they're not purged.
They're not. I was sued in 1992 in housing court, and every lease that I've ever gotten since then, including my most recent proprietary lease, it has come up that I had been sued in 1992. Back in 2008, they found out I had been sued in 1992. That's illegal. It's not supposed to happen, but it happens across the board.
It's almost like getting a traffic ticket, and they tell you in 2 to 3 years it's off your license, but somehow 10 years later the insurance companies know that you have that you had this violation, so it never really leaves, is really what you're saying.
Yes, except that it's more than a traffic ticket. It's more like a murder conviction.
Right, and it's a place where you're going to be living, by the way.
That's right.
Hopefully finding a place to
Landlords look at it that way.
All right, let's say I'm a tenant. I have a problem.
Yes.
My landlord's not giving me the heat and hot water that I want. I'm being bit by bed bugs. It's really just a complete mess.
Yes.
Tell me what I do.
I recommend that you go to housing court and request an HP proceeding. That's when the tenant sues the landlord to get repairs. It's not about rent. It's only about repairs.
Well, where does that rent go anyway, though? Do you still pay the landlord, or do you do something else with it?
That's a choice.
Okay.
I advise most of my clients to continue to pay the rent so they aren't sued and therefore aren't blacklisted. Today, when you bring an HP proceeding against a landlord, that does not put you on a blacklist because the blacklisting agencies, the tenant screening bureaus, don't look at the petitioners, since almost all the petitioners in housing court are landlords.
Okay. Last piece of advice. We don't have too much time. Give me a good one. Tenants watching right now and they think they have a problem with their landlord. What would you tell them to do? To
go to housing court to sue the landlord. Now, as of today, that won't blacklist you. In the future, it may start to blacklist you. So even that you have to be careful about. But sue the landlord, get repairs, and then you have also a record of how bad the conditions were.
Great advice. Jeffrey, you're going to come back, right?
I'd love to.
All right, well, that's all for today. It's time to deliberate. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and of course you for watching. Remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you would like to see on the show, email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. And until we see you again, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.